Hubby made me a cup of coffee which had a very strange smell. Made you a special coffee, honey, he said with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. I answered how sweet and quietly watched as my sister-in-law grabbed the mug from my hand. She always took everything that was mine, so I let her take this too. 15 minutes later, the screaming started. My name is Brianna, and at 32 years old, I make my living finding what people try to hide. As a forensic accountant, I track illegal funds and hidden assets, but I never thought I would have to use those skills in my own kitchen. Before I tell you how a Sunday brunch turned into a crime scene, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever dealt with in-laws who made your life a living hell. It was a humid Sunday morning in Atlanta at my mother-in-law Lucille's house. The air conditioning was humming, but the atmosphere in the dining room was stiflingly hot. Lucille sat at the head of the table wearing a string of pearls that I knew were fake, just like her affection for me. She was busy critiquing my hair while waiting for her golden children to arrive. My husband Darius walked in from the kitchen holding a ceramic mug with both hands. He was wearing his favorite polo shirt, the one he bought to look like the partners at his investment firm, even though I knew we were 3 months behind on the credit card payments for it. "Here you go, babe," he said, placing the mug in front of me. "I got my hands on some exclusive Arabica beans from a client. I thought you needed a pick-me-up." His voice was smooth, but his forehead was glistening with sweat. Darius never made coffee. He barely knew how to operate the machine. I looked down at the dark liquid swirling with an excessive amount of caramel syrup. I do not drink alcohol and I never smoke, so my sense of smell is sharper than most. Beneath the cloying sweetness of the artificial caramel, there was something else. A sharp metallic tang, the distinct scent of bitter almonds. It was faint, but to me it screamed danger. I looked up at Darius. His eyes were fixed on the mug waiting. Just as I raised the cup to my lips, feigning a sip, the dining room door burst open. Chantel, my 30-year-old sister-in-law, breezed in, throwing her designer bag onto the table. She looked me up and down with a sneer. "Really, Brianna, that dress again? You look like you are going to a funeral, not brunch." She flopped into the chair next to me, and her eyes landed on the steaming mug in my hand. "Wait, is that the reserve coffee Dad used to buy?" "Darius, you never make that for me." Before I could say a word, Chantel reached out and snatched the mug from my fingers. Her greed was a reflex. "If Brianna has it, I want it." That was her entire philosophy. I saw Darius's face drain of all color. His mouth opened to stop her, but no sound came out. If he stopped her, he would have to explain why. I sat back and folded my hands in my lap. "You are right, Chantel," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You should have it. You have always had such refined taste." I watched Darius as he stood by the sideboard, his hands gripping the wood so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like a man watching a bomb countdown he could not stop. His eyes darted from Chantel to the mug and back to me, pleading silently for me to do something. But I did nothing. I simply watched. Chantel lifted the mug to her lips, blowing on the steam dramatically. She took a long, deliberate sip, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. It was a power move, a petty victory in her mind. See, she seemed to say, "I always win." She swallowed and smacked her lips. She hummed loudly. "This is actually delicious, Darius. Much better than that bitter sludge Brianna usually makes. Maybe you should be the one in charge of coffee from now on." She took another gulp, draining half the cup. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but my face remained impassive. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady. The conversation around the table resumed. Lucille started complaining about the neighbor's renovation noise, and Darius sank into his chair looking like he was about to be sick. He did not touch his food. Every time Chantel lifted the mug, his flinch was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. 10 minutes passed. The mug was empty now, sitting next to Chantel's plate. She was in the middle of bragging about a new diamond ring she claimed Brad, her husband, had bought her for their anniversary. Brad, who worked as a pharmaceutical rep, was sitting quietly at the end of the table, looking exhausted as usual. "Look at the clarity," she said, extending her hand under the chandelier. "It cost a fortune, but I told Brad I deserved the best." Suddenly her hand dropped. Her face contorted in confusion, then fear. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear her vision. What she mumbled, her words slurring slightly. "Is it hot in here?" She tried to stand up, but her legs gave way. She collapsed back into her chair, knocking over the empty mug. It shattered on the floor, the ceramic shards skittering across the hardwood. Chantel's eyes rolled back into her head, showing only the whites. Her body went rigid, then began to jerk violently. Foam started to bubble at the corners of her mouth, tinged pink with blood where she had bitten her tongue. "Oh my God!" Lucille screamed, jumping up and knocking over her chair. "Chantel, baby, what is happening?" The room erupted into chaos. Brad rushed to his wife's side, trying to keep her from hitting her head on the table. "Call 911, he shouted, his voice cracking. Darius stood frozen, his face a mask of pure terror. He was not looking at his sister. He was looking at the shattered pieces of the mug on the floor. "No," he whispered, but in the sudden silence of the room it sounded like a scream. "No. It was not supposed to be you. It was not supposed to be you." I sat perfectly still, my water glass cool in my hand. I heard him, and I knew exactly what he meant. The coffee was not meant for Chantel. It was meant for me. And now the only question was why. The wail of the siren faded as the ambulance screeched into the emergency bay of Grady Memorial Hospital. I parked my car and walked into the sterile chaos of the waiting room. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, a scent that now made my stomach turn. Lucille was already there, pacing back and forth in her Sunday church heels. She looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown, her perfectly sprayed hair now in disarray. Brad was slumped in a plastic chair, his head in his hands, looking utterly defeated. And then there was Darius. My husband stood apart from everyone else, pressed into a corner near the vending machines. He was not crying. He was not pacing. He was typing furiously on his phone, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. 45 minutes crawled by in agonizing slowness. Finally, the double doors swung open and a doctor in teal scrubs stepped out. He looked exhausted. "Family of Chantel," he called out. We all rushed forward, forming a tight, anxious circle around him. "She is stable for now," the doctor said, his voice grave. "But we had to intubate her to protect her airway. The seizures were severe. We are looking at a case of acute neurotoxicity. Her system has been overwhelmed by a very potent chemical agent." Neurotoxicity. Lucille shrieked, the word ripping from her throat. "You mean poison? Someone poisoned my baby." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wild with grief and accusation. "It was you." Before I could react, she lunged forward. The slap echoed through the quiet waiting room, sharp and stinging. My head whipped to the side and my cheek burned, but I did not flinch. I slowly turned back to face her, my expression unreadable. "You gave her that cup," Lucille screamed, pointing a shaking finger in my face. "I saw you. You handed it to her. You have always been jealous of my Chantel. You tried to kill her." Security guards started to move toward us, but I held up a hand to stop them. I did not look at Lucille. I looked past her to Darius. He had seen his mother assault me. He had heard her accuse me of attempted murder. But he did not move. He did not step forward to defend his wife. He just stood there, clutching his phone, his knuckles white, staring at the screen, as if his life depended on whatever message he was sending. I turned back to my mother-in-law, my voice ice cold. "If I wanted to hurt your daughter, Lucille, I would not do it in a room full of witnesses. And I certainly would not use a cup of coffee that my husband made for me." The doctor cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic violence unfolding in his lobby. He looked down at his clipboard, his brow furrowed. "There is something else. The toxicology screen is showing some extremely unusual markers. We found high concentrations of a substance we almost never see in human medicine. He paused, looking at each of us with intense scrutiny. Does the patient work with livestock? Specifically, does anyone here know why she would have access to illicit racehorse stimulants? The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Darius, and for the first time he looked up from his phone. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw raw, unadulterated panic. Two uniformed officers arrived 10 minutes later, their expressions grim. They separated us immediately. Lucille was wailing dramatically into a tissue while Brad sat silently, his face pale. I was escorted to a small interview room near the nurses' station. The female officer, Officer Jenkins, sat across from me, her notebook open. Mrs. Peterson, she began, her pen poised. Can you walk me through exactly what happened with the coffee this morning? I took a slow breath, my mind shifting gears. I was not just a terrified wife anymore, I was a forensic accountant. Facts, details, and logical sequences were my armor. My husband made coffee. I stated, my voice calm and measured. He used a new type of bean. My sister-in-law, Chantel, took the cup from me before I could drink it. She consumed it quickly, then suffered a seizure. Those are the events. Officer Jenkins narrowed her eyes. Your mother-in-law claims you poisoned the drink. Is there any reason you would want to harm Ms. Chantel? I leaned forward slightly. Officer, I investigate financial fraud for a living. If I wanted to hurt someone, I would ruin their credit score, not poison them at a family brunch. Besides, Chantel has been struggling with her weight recently. She has been buying supplements online from unregulated sources. Perhaps you should investigate if she took something that interacted badly with the caffeine. It was a calculated deflection, but plausible enough to plant a seed of doubt. Officer Jenkins scribbled furiously. We will look into that. You are free to go for now, but do not leave town. As I walked out of the interview room, the hospital corridor was bustling. I scanned the area for Darius. He was not with his mother. I spotted him near the vending machines, deep in conversation with a man in a white coat, not the ER doctor from earlier, but someone older with silver hair. They were huddled close, their voices hushed. I moved silently toward them, using a large potted plant for cover. I strained to hear over the hum of the refrigerator unit. Darius looked desperate, sweat staining the collar of his shirt. He was gripping the doctor's arm, his fingers digging into the fabric. You have to help me, he hissed. If they run a full panel, they will find it. I cannot let that happen. The doctor shook his head, trying to pull away, but Darius held firm. Please, Uncle Marcus, just this once. Delete the blood panel results, wipe the system. Whatever it costs, I will pay you double. Just make it disappear. Lucille's voice was still ringing in my ears as I pulled out of the hospital parking lot. Go get Chantel's silk robe and her special pillow, she needs comfort. She barked the order like I was her personal assistant, not the woman her son just tried to murder. I nodded meekly, playing the part of the traumatized sister-in-law, but my hands on the steering wheel were steady. I was not going home to pack a bag for Chantel. I was going home to find the weapon. The house was silent when I unlocked the front door. It felt different now, like the walls were holding their breath. I walked past the kitchen where the shattered mug still lay on the floor, a jagged reminder of my near miss. I ignored it. I went straight to the garage. This was Darius's sanctuary, his man cave where he smoked his expensive cigars and pretended to be a master of the universe. If he hid anything, it would be here. The air smelled of stale tobacco and secrets. I pulled on a pair of latex gloves from the cleaning kit and started with the trash can. Darius was arrogant. He never believed anyone would check on him. Beneath empty cigar wrappers and a receipt for a liquor store run, I found it. A small amber prescription bottle. The label had been hastily clawed off, but there was enough adhesive residue left to trap a single long blonde hair. Chantel's hair. My stomach twisted. Had she helped him acquire this? I turned the bottle over. On the bottom, stamped into the plastic, was a manufacturing code. I pulled out my phone and typed it into a pharmaceutical database I used for work. The results loaded and my blood ran cold. Digoxin. It was a high-potency heart medication used to treat heart failure and irregular heartbeats. In a healthy person, an overdose would cause nausea, confusion, and eventually cardiac arrest, mimicking a massive stroke or natural heart failure. It was elegant, it was quiet, and it was exactly the kind of coward's weapon Darius would choose. He did not want a messy crime scene, he wanted a grieving widower narrative. I slipped the bottle into my evidence bag, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there before Darius returned, but just as I turned to leave, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a priority alert from our joint bank account. I swiped the screen expecting a bill notification or a late fee. Instead, I stared at the numbers, unable to breathe. A withdrawal notification. $500,000. The entire balance of our life savings, the money meant for our future, our retirement, everything we had built. It was gone. Transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands exactly 3 minutes ago. Darius was not just trying to kill me, he was cashing out. I left the garage, moving quickly back into the house. The empty space felt hostile now, every shadow hiding a new betrayal. I went straight to Darius's home office. He was usually meticulous about locking his laptop, treating it like the nuclear football. But panic makes people sloppy. The screen was dark, but when I touched the trackpad, it flared to life. He was still logged in. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't look for emails or texts. I looked for the money. As a forensic accountant, I know that numbers never lie, even when people do. I pulled up his trading accounts, the ones he thought were encrypted beyond reach. What I found made my breath hitch. It was a massacre. A sea of red numbers stretching back 6 months. He had leveraged everything on high-risk crypto futures, betting against the market, doubling down every time he lost. The total loss was staggering, $3 million. But it got worse. I found a folder labeled simply loans. Inside were digital receipts from lenders that didn't use banks or credit checks. They used threats. The interest rates were predatory, compounding daily. The latest message received just this morning was chillingly brief. 1 week, Darius. Or we collect in person. He was drowning and he needed a lifeline fast. I kept digging, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed to know how he planned to pay them back. Our savings account was empty, but $500,000 wouldn't even cover the interest on what he owed. He needed millions. And then I found it. Buried in a subfolder named Assets, there was a single PDF file. I opened it, and the rooms seemed to spin. It was a life insurance policy. A new one. The beneficiary was Darius. The insured was me. The payout amount was $5 million. I scrolled to the bottom, my vision blurring. There on the signature line was my name. But the handwriting was slightly off, the loop of the B, too wide, the slant too sharp. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery, nonetheless. The date of effect was 3 days ago. The pieces slammed into place with terrifying clarity. The coffee, the sudden affection, the panic when Chantel drank it. He wasn't just trying to kill me. He was trying to cash in a $5 million ticket to save his own skin. I was worth more to him dead than alive. 3 days later, Chantel opened her eyes. The doctors called it a miracle, but looking at her lying in that hospital bed, it felt more like a curse. The neurotoxin had ravaged her nervous system, leaving the entire left side of her body limp and useless. Worst of all, her vocal cords were paralyzed. My sister-in-law, who had never met a silence she could not fill, was now trapped in a prison of her own making, unable to scream, unable to curse, unable to tell the world what she had seen. She just stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred that did not need words to be understood. Lucille stood by the bedside, fluffing pillows that did not need fluffing, performing her grief for an audience of nurses. When she finally turned to me, her face was a mask of cold resolve. "You did this," she said, her voice level and terrifying. "You handed her that cup. You might as well have poured the poison down her throat yourself. Now you are going to fix it. I started to protest to remind her that I was the intended victim, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. I do not want to hear your excuses, Brianna. My daughter needs round-the-clock care. The rehabilitation center costs a fortune, and insurance will not cover a private nurse, so you are going to do it. You are going to quit that little job of yours, and you are going to be here every single day. You will feed her. You will change her. You will be her voice since you took hers away. It is the least you can do to atone for your carelessness. It is time you acted like family instead of a board member. I looked at Darius, expecting him to step in to tell his mother that asking me to resign from a senior position at a top accounting firm was insanity. He was standing by the window looking out at the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in a performance of weary sorrow. He turned slowly, his eyes wet with fake tears. "Babe, Mom is right," he said, his voice cracking perfectly. "We have to make sacrifices. Chantel is family. I know you love your job, but this is an emergency. We can live on my salary for a while. Think of it as penance." Penance. The word hung in the air, heavy and unjust. I opened my mouth to refuse to tell them both to go to hell, but Darius walked over to me. He wrapped his arms around me in a hug that looked comforting from the hallway, but felt like a vice. He pulled me close, his lips brushing my ear, sending a shiver of revulsion down my spine. "Do not fight her on this, Brianna," he whispered so low only I could hear. "If you do not make Mom happy, if you walk out that door, I will stop the auto pay on your father's nursing home. I checked the accounts this morning. He is overdue. One call from me and they put him on the street. Do you really want to kill 2 people in 1 week?" I walked back into the house that evening, my heart a stone in my chest. I had smiled at Lucille, nodded at Darius, and promised to submit my resignation letter in the morning. It was a lie, of course. I had no intention of quitting. But I needed time. I needed them to think I was broken compliant, a good little soldier falling in line. The house was quiet when we returned. Darius was overly attentive, offering to make dinner, pouring water with a shaking hand. He was trying to be the doting husband, but the smell of desperation clung to him like cheap cologne. He knew his plan had failed. He knew he was running out of time. And I knew he would try again. I went to bed early, feigning a headache. I locked the bedroom door, a habit I had started since the coffee incident. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks and groans of the house. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. The soft click of the bedroom door handle being tried. Then the muffled sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, thirst drove me out of bed. I unlocked the door, slowly, wincing at the noise. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. The hallway was dark. I walked softly toward the stairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. As I approached the top step, something glinted in the beam of my light. I stopped. I knelt down and shone the light closer. The top 3 steps were slick wet with something viscous. I touched it with the tip of my finger and rubbed it against my thumb. Oil. Cooking oil. Thick, slippery, and lethal. If I had walked down those stairs in the dark, half asleep, I would have broken my neck. A cold rage settled over me. He was not even trying to be subtle anymore. He was getting sloppy. I looked around the hallway, my mind racing. I needed him to think he had succeeded. I needed to see his face when he thought I was dead. My eyes landed on the small robotic cat toy I had bought for my niece before things went south. It was heavy, made of hard plastic and metal roughly the size of a small animal. It was perfect. I picked up the toy and walked to the edge of the stairs. I took a deep breath and hurled it down. It hit the first step with a thud, then tumbled down the rest of the flight, crashing and banging against the wooden walls, mimicking the sound of a falling body. It landed at the bottom with a final sickening crack. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway and waited. Seconds later, the door to the guest room flew open. Darius burst out wearing only his boxers, his face flushed with adrenaline. He did not look scared, he looked triumphant. A wide, manic grin stretched across his face as he rushed toward the stairs. Brianna? He shouted, his voice laced with a terrible fake concern. Brianna, oh my God, are you okay? He reached the top of the stairs and looked down, ready to see my broken body. Instead, he saw a shattered plastic cat. His grin faltered. He looked up confused, and his eyes met mine. I was standing 5 feet away, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed. I am fine, Darius, I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion. But I think Mr. Whiskers had a little accident. You really should be more careful with that oil. Someone could get hurt. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to explain, but nothing came out. He just stared at me, the ghost of his victory fading into the reality of his failure. And in that moment we both knew. The game was no longer hidden, it was war. The next morning I went back to the hospital, not for Chantel and not for Lucille, but because I needed an ally. The smell of antiseptic was starting to feel like a second skin. I found Brad sitting on a bench outside the emergency room entrance. He was hunched over a cigarette, shaking slightly despite the warm Atlanta sun. Brad was the invisible man in this family. Chantel treated him like a wallet, and Lucille treated him like the help. But Brad was a pharmacist, and right now that made him the most important person in my world. I sat down next to him. He jumped, nearly dropping his cigarette. Brianna, he stammered. I did not see you there. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. I am not surprised, Brad, I said gently. You have a lot on your mind. How is she doing? Brad let out a shaky breath. The doctors say the paralysis might be permanent. She cannot speak, Brianna. She just looks at me and cries. I do not know what to do. He took a long drag on his cigarette, his hand trembling. Lucille is blaming everyone. The doctors, the nurses, even me. She says I should have known something was wrong, but how could I know? I was just eating my eggs. I watched him carefully. Brad was weak, yes, but he was not stupid. He knew something. Brad, I said, keeping my voice low. The doctors found digoxin in her system. High levels. That is not something you buy over the counter. Do you know where it came from? Brad froze. He stared at the burning tip of his cigarette, refusing to meet my eyes. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printout of the inventory logs from the pharmacy where Brad worked. I had accessed them using the same password he used for his Netflix account, which Chantel had loudly complained about forgetting at Thanksgiving. There is a discrepancy, Brad. 3 bottles of high-potency digoxin went missing from your inventory last week. The same week Darius came to visit you at work. Brad's head snapped up. How did you know that? He whispered. I am a forensic accountant, Brad. I notice when numbers do not add up. And right now, the only thing standing between you and a police investigation is me. If they trace that batch number back to your pharmacy, you will lose your license. Maybe even go to jail. Is that what you want? Tears welled up in his eyes. I did not give it to him, Brianna, I swear. He came by, said he wanted to see where I worked. He was being so nice for once, asking about the security, asking about the stock. I left him in the office for 5 minutes to take a call. Just 5 minutes. When I came back, he was gone. I did not check the inventory until yesterday, after the doctor told us what it was. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. His hands were shaking so hard, the paper rustled. He handed it to me. It was a printout of the security log from his office, showing Darius's entry and exit times perfectly aligning with the inventory discrepancy. That bottle was mine, Brad choked out. Darius stole my keys. He took it from my safe. I am so scared, Brianna. If the police find out, they will think I helped him. I cannot go to jail. I have kids. Please, you have to help me. I looked at Brad, seeing not just a frightened man, but a key to unraveling the entire twisted knot of my family. Chantel knew, I said, my voice flat. She knew about the embezzlement, didn't she? Brad flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked around nervously, checking to make sure no one was listening. She found out 6 months ago, he whispered. She saw the statements when she borrowed Darius's laptop. She saw the transfers, the fake accounts, everything. So she blackmailed her own brother. It was not a question. Chantel's lifestyle had upgraded significantly in the last few months. New cars, designer clothes, lavish vacations. I had assumed Darius was just being a generous brother, but now I knew better. She threatened to tell Lucille. Brad continued. She said if Darius didn't pay up, she would ruin him. She demanded $10,000 a month. Darius was desperate. He told me he was drowning. He said Chantel was bleeding him dry. The pieces fell into place with sickening precision. Darius wasn't just trying to pay off his gambling debts. He was trying to pay off his sister. And when the money ran out, he decided to solve both problems at once. Kill me. Collect the $5 million insurance payout, pay off the loan sharks, and silence Chantel with a golden parachute. Or maybe he planned to kill her too eventually. With Darius there was no bottom. And now she's lying in there paralyzed by the very poison her brother meant for me. It's almost poetic, isn't it, Brad? Karma has a wicked sense of humor. Brad stared at his shoes, his face gray. He did not mean to hurt her, Brianna. He loves Chantel in his own sick way. He just needed the money. He thought you were the only way out. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I was not just a victim in a domestic tragedy. I was a player in a deadly game, and I was surrounded by wolves. Darius, the sociopathic gambler. Chantel, the greedy blackmailer. Lucille, the enabler. And Brad, the coward. I was alone in a nest of vipers. Brad, I said, my voice hard. I need you to testify. I need you to tell the police everything you just told me. About the theft, about the blackmail, about the poison. Brad shook his head violently, his eyes wide with terror. I can't. They will destroy me. Lucille knows people. Darius knows people. If I talk, they will pin it all on me. They will say I stole the drugs. They will say I poisoned my own wife to get her money. I can't do it, Brianna. Please don't make me. I looked down at him, pity warring with disgust. You have a choice, Brad. You can be a witness or you can be an accomplice. Because I am going to bring them down. All of them. And when I do, you do not want to be standing on the wrong side of the wreckage. I turned and walked away, leaving him shivering in the sun. I knew he wouldn't help me. Not yet. Fear was a powerful motivator, but survival was stronger. I had to make sure he realized that his only chance of survival was with me. I walked back into the hospital, ready to face the monsters with a smile on my face. I returned to the house that evening wearing the mask of a defeated woman. My shoulders were slumped, my eyes downcast. I walked into the living room where Darius was pacing with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up wary. I did it, I said, my voice trembling just enough. I emailed my resignation. I told them I had a family emergency. It is effective immediately. Darius let out a long breath, his shoulders relaxing. Good. That is good, Brianna. You did the right thing. Mom will be pleased. He walked over and kissed my forehead, a gesture that made my skin crawl. We will get through this, babe. We just have to stick together. I nodded, burying my face in his chest to hide the cold calculation in my eyes. I had not resigned. I had called my boss, explained that I was dealing with a severe family crisis, and requested a leave of absence to work remotely. He agreed without hesitation. My career was safe, but Darius did not need to know that. He needed to think I was isolated, dependent, and weak. Over the next few days, I played the part of the dutiful wife perfectly. I cooked, I cleaned, I visited Chantel at the rehab center, sitting by her bed for hours, reading magazines aloud while she glared at me. But every moment Darius was not looking, I was working. I used his shower time to install spyware on his phone. It was a simple program disguised as a system update that would record his calls and mirror his texts to a secure cloud server. I slipped a tiny pinhole camera into the eye of the decorative owl statue on the bookshelf in the living room, a gift from his aunt that he hated but never threw away. I placed another under the kitchen cabinet, pointed directly at the island where he took his late-night calls. The house was no longer a home. It was a surveillance state, and I was the operator. I spent my nights in the guest room claiming insomnia with my laptop open monitoring the feeds. I watched him pace. I watched him drink. I listened to his frantic whispered calls to numbers I traced back to shell companies and burner phones. 3 days into my surveillance, I struck gold. It was late, almost midnight. I was in the guest room watching the living room feed. Darius was on the couch nursing a tumbler of scotch. The front door opened, and Lucille walked in. She had a key, of course. She never knocked. She sat down next to him, her face hard. "Did you talk to the lawyers?" she asked, her voice sharp. Darius nodded. "They say the insurance payout will be delayed if there is an investigation. We need it to look like an accident, Mom. A clean accident. No more poison." Lucille sighed, reaching over to pat his knee. "You always were impatient, Darius. You rush things. That is why Chantel got hurt. Next time you have to be careful. Do it right. Make it look like a fall or a car crash. Something tragic, but explainable. We cannot afford another mistake. That useless wife of yours has served her purpose. It is time for her to go." I watched the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. They were not just covering up a mistake, they were planning my execution, and they were discussing it like they were planning a dinner party. I sat in the plush leather chair of a nondescript office building downtown. Across from me sat Michael Vance, a criminal defense attorney known for his shark-like instincts. I had found him through a colleague and paid his retainer in cash I had been stashing away. I laid everything out. The coffee, the poison, the insurance policy, the threats, the video of Lucille and Darius discussing my murder. Michael listened in silence, his face impassive. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "It is compelling, Brianna," he said, his voice grave. "But it is circumstantial. The video is good, but a defense attorney could argue they were speaking hypothetically or out of anger. The poison was administered to Chantel, not you. Darius could claim Brad left the drugs out, and Chantel took them by mistake. He could claim the insurance policy was just prudent planning. Without a direct admission of intent to kill you specifically, it is a he said she said scenario. And with his money and connections, he might walk." My heart sank. I risked my life to get this, and it is not enough. Michael shook his head. "Not for a conviction. Not for murder. Attempted murder is hard to prove without a smoking gun. We need him to say it. We need him to admit that the poison was for you and that he plans to try again. We need a confession." I felt a chill run through me. "You want me to wear a wire?" Michael opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small black velvet box. Inside, nestled in foam, was what looked like a simple pearl button. "It is a high-fidelity recording device," he explained. "It has a 12-hour battery life and can transmit audio in real time to a secure server. You can sew it onto a blouse or a jacket. It is undetectable unless someone knows exactly what to look for." I picked up the tiny device. It felt light, harmless. But it was a weapon. "You have to get him comfortable," Michael said. "You have to make him feel safe. Make him feel like he has won. That is when men like him get sloppy. That is when they brag. You need to push him, Brianna. You need to corner him until the truth is the only thing left." I looked at Michael, fear warring with resolve. "If he finds this, he will kill me right there." Michael nodded solemnly. "That is a risk, but if you do not do this, he will kill you anyway. At least this way, you have a chance to take him down with you." I closed the box and slipped it into my purse. I sewed the button onto my favorite silk blouse that night, my hands steady despite the terror thrumming in my veins. I looked at myself in the mirror. The button looked innocuous, a simple, elegant detail. But it was a lifeline. I was walking into the lioness den armed with a pearl. I had to make him confess. I had to make him say the words that would put him away forever. And I had to do it without losing my life in the process. The charity gala was held at the St. Regis, a bastion of old money and new pretenses. The ballroom dripped with crystal chandeliers and the scent of expensive perfume. Lucille had insisted I attend, claiming it was crucial for the family image. So there I was, squeezed into a sapphire gown that matched the bruise on my soul, my arm linked through Darius's, as if we were the perfect couple. He was charming, everyone shaking hands, flashing that $1 million smile that hid a bankrupt soul. We moved through the crowd, a shark in a tuxedo and his prey in silk. Darius introduced me to potential investors, bragging about my career while simultaneously squeezing my arm just a little too hard. Every compliment felt like a threat. Every smile felt like a grimace. I scanned the room, my eyes sharp behind the mask of a dutiful wife. I was looking for the money, the real money. And then I saw him. A man in a bespoke suit that cost more than my car, standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water. He didn't look like a philanthropist. He looked like a predator. His name was Viktor Volkov, a venture capitalist with a reputation for aggressive takeovers and even more aggressive debt collection. Darius stiffened beside me. "Go mingle, honey," he said, his voice tight. "I need to speak to Mr. Volkov about a business opportunity." I nodded, feigning disinterest, and drifted toward the buffet table. But I didn't eat. I circled back, keeping to the shadows of a large floral arrangement, positioning myself just close enough to let the microphone button on my blouse do its work. Darius approached Volkov with a deference that bordered on fear. "Mr. Volkov, so good to see you," he said, extending a hand that Volkov ignored. "I wanted to give you an update on our arrangement." Volkov swirled his water, not looking at Darius. "I don't want updates, Darius. I want my money. 3 million, plus interest." Darius swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I know. It's coming. There was a complication. My sister, she had a medical emergency. But everything is back on track. The insurance payout is guaranteed. I just need a little more time." Volkov turned slowly, his eyes cold and dead. "Time is money, Darius. And you have run out of both. You have 3 days. If I don't see that 5 million in my account by Friday, you won't be worrying about insurance payouts. You will be worrying about how much of you they can fit in a casket." Darius paled, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Please, Victor, I can't rush this. It has to look like an accident." Volkov leaned in close, his voice a whisper that carried the weight of a death sentence. "That sounds like a you problem. 3 days, Darius. Or you will be the one lying in a box." He walked away, leaving Darius trembling in his wake. I stood frozen in the shadows, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had heard it all, and more importantly, I had recorded it all. The clock was ticking, and it wasn't just my life on the line anymore. It was a race to the grave, and only one of us was going to walk away. It was time to pull the trigger on the psychological warfare. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, using their Wi-Fi to bounce the signal. I pulled up the photo I had taken of the pharmacy security logs, the ones Brad had given me. It clearly showed Darius entering the secure storage area at the exact time the digoxin went missing. I attached the image to a message from an untraceable number. The caption was short and brutal. "I know what you stole. Tick-tock, Darius." I drove home and immediately checked the hidden camera feed on my laptop. Darius was in the kitchen pouring himself another drink. His phone pinged. He picked it up, casual at first. Then he froze. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, but he did not even notice. He stared at the screen, his chest heaving. He dialed the number immediately, but I had already destroyed the SIM card. He hurled his phone across the room, screaming a string of obscenities that would make a sailor blush. He looked wild, trapped, and then his eyes narrowed. He muttered one name, Brad. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I knew exactly where he was going. Brad was staying at a cheap motel near the rehab center since Lucille had banned him from the family home for incompetence. I did not intervene. I could not. This was the push Brad needed. An hour later, my burner phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a call from Brad's number. I answered, silence on the other end, except for ragged, wet breathing. "Brianna," he rasped. His voice was thick, gurgling. I drove to the motel. The door was unlocked. Brad was sitting on the edge of the bed, a mess of blood and bruises. His left eye was swollen shut. His lips split wide open and he was clutching his ribs. Darius had worked him over good. "He came here." Brad spat blood onto the carpet. He thought I sent the text. He thought I was blackmailing him for more money. He said if I tried to squeeze him, he would finish the job. He did not believe me when I said I did not do it. He just kept hitting me. I handed Brad a bag of ice from the bucket. "I told you he was a monster," I said quietly, my voice devoid of pity. "He does not care about family, Brad. He only cares about survival. And right now he thinks you are the threat. He thinks you are the loose end." Brad looked up at me with his one good eye. The fear that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by a cold, hard hate. He crossed the line, Brianna. I covered for him. I stole for him. I even let him poison my wife because I was too scared to stop him. And this is how he repays me. He winced as he shifted his weight, his jaw setting in a grim line. "I am done being the whipping boy. You want him down. I will help you bury him. I am done running. Brianna, I will do whatever you say. Just tell me what to do." The clock was ticking. Darius was desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. I watched him on the hidden camera feed, pacing the living room, muttering to himself. He made a call to a number I did not recognize, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. When he hung up, he went to the garage. He came back 10 minutes later, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, his face set in a grim mask of determination. He had done it. He had tampered with my car. I knew my routine. Every Tuesday evening, I drove across town to visit my father at the nursing home. It was a 40-minute drive, mostly on winding back roads with steep drop-offs. If my brakes failed on one of those curves, I would be dead before the paramedics even arrived. It was a classic move, unimaginative but effective. But Darius had forgotten one thing. Tuesday was also Lucille's spa day, and her car, a vintage Mercedes, was currently in the shop for engine trouble. She had called me earlier, demanding to borrow my SUV because she refused to be seen in a taxi. I had agreed, of course, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. "Why not take it, Lucille?" I had said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "I can take an Uber to see Dad. It is no trouble at all." I watched from the upstairs window as Lucille pulled into the driveway. She honked twice, impatient as always. I walked out, keys in hand, and handed them over with a smile. "Be careful," I said. "The roads can be tricky this time of year." Lucille snatched the keys without a thank you. "Just make sure you fill the tank when you get it back," she snapped before climbing in and slamming the door. I went back inside and waited. Darius was in his office pretending to work, but I knew he was waiting for the phone to ring. He was waiting for the news that his wife was dead. 30 minutes later, the call came. But it was not the police. It was Lucille. She was hysterical, screaming so loud I could hear her through the phone without even putting it on speaker. "My car," she shrieked. "The brakes, they just went." I went straight through the guardrail into the lake. I could have drowned. Darius rushed into the room, his face pale with anticipation. "Is it done?" he asked, his eyes wide. "Is she gone?" I held out the phone, my expression a mask of shock. "It is your mother, Darius. She borrowed my car. She crashed into the lake. She is alive, but she is furious." Darius froze. His eyes went wide with horror, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He grabbed the phone, his hands shaking. "Mom," he choked out. "Mom, are you okay?" I did not need to hear the other end of the conversation to know what she was saying. I could imagine the vitriol, the accusations, the sheer, unadulterated rage. Darius sank onto the sofa, looking like a man who had just watched his own execution. He had tried to kill his wife, and instead, he had almost killed his mother. And worse, she knew something was wrong. Accidents happen, but brake failures on a brand new SUV do not just happen. Lucille was not stupid. She would start asking questions, and Darius knew he had no answers. Lucille arrived back at the house an hour later, soaking wet and smelling of pond water and rage. She did not even look at me as she stormed past the living room and dragged Darius into the kitchen. I stayed back, slipping into the pantry, where I had a clear line of sight through the crack in the door and perfect audio pickup for my recording device. "You stupid boy," Lucille hissed, slapping Darius across the face. The sound was like a gunshot. Darius stumbled back, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with fear. "Mom, please let me explain." "Explain." What? Lucille screamed, her voice cracking. "Explain why the brakes on a car with less than 10,000 miles on it suddenly snapped. Explain why my foot went all the way to the floorboard as I careened toward the water. You touched that car, Darius. I know you did." Darius crumbled. He sank onto a kitchen stool, burying his face in his hands. "I had no choice, Mom. Volkov said 3 days. 3 days or I am dead. I had to do something. I did not know you would take the car. It was meant for her." Lucille stared at him, her chest heaving. For a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine horror in her eyes. She was looking at her son, the boy she had coddled and protected, and seeing a monster. A man willing to kill to cover his own mistakes. But then just as quickly the horror vanished, replaced by the cold, hard steel of self-preservation. She was not horrified that he was a killer. She was horrified that he was incompetent. "You are reckless," Lucille spat. "You are sloppy and you are dangerous. Do you have any idea what would happen if the police looked at that car? If they found tool marks on the brake lines? We would be ruined. All of us. The scandal would destroy everything I have built." She began to pace, her wet heels squelching on the tile. "We cannot let them examine the wreckage. We have to control the narrative. We will say we noticed the car acting up weeks ago. We will say we were planning to take it in for service. We will blame the manufacturer, a faulty master cylinder, a factory defect. We will threaten to sue them into oblivion if they try to investigate." Darius looked up, hope warring with shame in his eyes. "You will do that. You will cover for me." Lucille grabbed him by the lapels of his shirt, shaking him violently. "I am not doing this for you, Darius. I am doing this for the family name. I will not have my son branded a murderer because he is too stupid to hire a professional. But this is the last time. You fix this mess, and you fix it now. No more accidents, no more slip-ups." I checked the levels on my recorder, ensuring every syllable was captured crystal clear. I had them. Not just Darius, but Lucille, too. An accessory after the fact. A co-conspirator in attempted murder. The audio file saved and uploaded to the cloud instantly. Lucille leaned in close to Darius, her face inches from his, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "You listen to me, and you listen good. You tried to kill your wife and you almost killed me. You are an idiot." I waited until the next morning to drop the bait. Darius was in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like it was a complex mathematical equation. He looked haggard. The pressure from Volkov and Lucille was crushing him. I walked in holding a letter I had forged on heavy cream-colored stationery. I made sure my hands were trembling slightly, feigning shock. "Darius," I said, my voice breathless, "you are not going to believe this." He looked up, his eyes dull. "What is it now, Brianna?" I handed him the letter. It was a notification from a solicitor in Savannah. My great-aunt Clara, a woman I had not seen since I was 5, had passed away. And she had left me her estate. Not just a house, but 60 acres of prime, undeveloped land near the coast. The estimated value was $7 million. I watched his eyes scan the page. I saw the exact moment the words registered. The dullness vanished, replaced by a hungry, predatory light. "7 million," he whispered. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, he did not look at me like an obstacle. He looked at me like a winning lottery ticket. "Are you sure this is real?" I nodded. I called the number. It is legitimate. I just have to go down there next week to sign the transfer papers. But Darius, I do not know anything about land. I do not know what to do. He was on his feet in an instant, crossing the room to hug me. The smell of his desperation was gone, replaced by the manic energy of a gambler who just hit the jackpot. Baby, this is amazing. This changes everything. Do not worry about the details. I will handle it. We can put the land in a trust, protect it from taxes. I know a guy. He pulled back his hands, gripping my shoulders. I was suddenly his partner again, his beloved wife. The plan to kill me was gone, evaporated in the face of $7 million. He could not kill me. Not yet. Not until I signed. We have to celebrate, he declared, pacing the kitchen. This is a sign, Brianna. Our luck is turning. We should have people over. A real party. This weekend. I want everyone to know that the Peterson family is back on top. He was already mentally spending the money paying off Volkov, buying Lucila's silence, upgrading his life. He wanted an audience. He wanted to gloat. I hesitated, playing the part of the reluctant introvert. Are you sure, Darius? With everything going on with Chantel, he waved a hand dismissively. Chantel will be fine. This is about us. I will invite the partners. I will invite Volkov. We will show them all. He looked at me, a manic grin stretching his face. It will be the party of the year. I smiled back, a cold, sharp thing that did not reach my eyes. Yes, Darius, I said. It certainly will be. He thought he was organizing his victory lap. He had no idea he was setting the stage for his own execution. And I would be the one pulling the lever. I sat in the back of an unmarked sedan, parked 3 blocks from my office. The air conditioner blasted cold air against the humid Atlanta afternoon, but I barely felt it. Beside me sat Agent Sterling from the Financial Crimes Division, a man I had worked with on 3 previous fraud cases. I handed him the heavy leather binder. It landed on his lap with a satisfying thud. Inside was the autopsy of Darius S. financial life. Every laundered dollar, every shell company, every crypto transfer that linked my husband directly to Viktor Volkov's criminal empire. You have outdone yourself, Brianna Sterling said, flipping through the pages. We have been trying to pin Volkov down for years. He always uses intermediaries. But Darius was sloppy. He transferred funds directly from Volkov's front companies to his personal accounts to cover his losses. This ties them together perfectly. So you will move tonight, I asked. Sterling nodded. We have teams ready. Volkov is confirmed to attend the party. We want them both in the same room. We want the handover. If Darius tries to sign anything or transfer assets to you, we move in. It is a takedown, Brianna. We are clearing the board. I walked back to my car, feeling a strange lightness. The trap was set. The hunters were in place. All I had to do was deliver the prey. Back at the house, Darius was in a frenzy of preparation. Caterers were setting up tents in the backyard, and cases of expensive champagne were being stacked in the kitchen. He was barking orders at the staff, treating them with the same disdain he usually reserved for me. He saw me and grinned a manic predatorous smile. Everything is perfect, babe, he said. Tonight we celebrate our future. I smiled back. It certainly will be a night to remember. But there was one variable I had not accounted for. The phone rang, and Darius put it on speaker. It was Lucille. She is out, Darius. Chantel has been discharged. The line crackled, and then Chantel's voice came through, slurred and weak but dripping with venom. I am coming tonight, Darius. Do not try to stop me. Darius frowned. Chantel, you are in a wheelchair. You are not well. You should rest. No. Chantel snapped. I am coming. I know what she did, Darius. I know she poisoned me. She thinks she has won. She thinks she is going to be the queen of the manor with her inheritance. But I am going to tell everyone. I am going to scream it in front of your partners. I am going to ruin her. Darius looked at me, panic flaring in his eyes. I kept my face mask of concern perfect. Let her come, I said softly. She is family, Darius. If she wants to be here, let her. It will look better if we are all together. Besides, what can she really do? Darius hesitated, then nodded. Fine. Bring her mom. But keep her under control. He hung up and turned to me. You are a saint, Brianna. Most women would not want her here after everything. I patted his cheek. I want everyone here, Darius. I want the whole family together for the big moment. He thought I was being gracious. He did not realize that Chantel's arrival was the final nail in his coffin. Her stupidity, her blinding need for revenge, ensured that not a single member of the family would escape the blast radius. They were all gathering for their own funeral, and I was the only one who knew the eulogy was already written. The backyard had been transformed into a grotesque parody of elegance. White tents glowed under strings of Edison bulbs, and a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. The guests were a mix of Darius's colleagues, people from the firm who thought he was a rising star, and a smattering of relatives Lucille had summoned to witness the family's triumph. Viktor Volkov stood near the bar, a glass of vodka in his hand, watching the proceedings with the detached interest of a man waiting to be paid. Darius was in his element. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, his arm draped possessively around my waist. He introduced me to everyone as his partner, his better half, his rock. I smiled until my face hurt playing the part of the devoted wife while counting down the minutes until his world imploded. Lucille arrived pushing Chantel in a wheelchair. Chantel looked frail, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes were burning with a feverish intensity. She wore a silk dress that hung loosely on her frame, a stark contrast to the vibrant woman she had been just weeks ago. She glared at me as she passed her lips, moving silently, forming words I could not hear, but could easily guess. Darius led me to the center of the tent, where a small stage had been set up. He tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, calling for silence. The music stopped, and the crowd turned toward us. Friends, family, colleagues, Darius began, his voice projecting confidence. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have been through a difficult time recently with my sister's illness, but tonight we are celebrating new beginnings. He turned to me, his expression softening into a practiced look of adoration. My wife Brianna has been my strength through it all. And now, thanks to a stroke of incredible fortune, we are embarking on a new chapter. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to me with a flourish. This is just the first step, babe. The paperwork for the land transfer. Once you sign this, we can start building our dream home, or selling it to secure our future. I took the envelope, my fingers brushing against the heavy paper. I knew what was inside. It was not just a transfer deed. Buried in the legal jargon were clauses that would give Darius full power of attorney over my assets, irrevocable rights to sell, and a waiver of my spousal protections. It was a document designed to strip me of everything I owned and everything I was about to inherit. He was handing me my own financial death warrant in front of 100 witnesses and calling it a gift. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the greed in his eyes, the arrogance, the utter lack of conscience. He thought he had won. He thought I was the same naive woman who had married him 3 years ago, believing in his potential. He did not see the forensic accountant who had spent the last week dissecting his life. He did not see the wife who had survived his poison. I reached for the Mont Blanc pen he offered. The crowd held its breath, expecting a touching moment of marital unity. I uncapped the pen and held it over the signature line. Darius's smile widened a predatory grin of triumph. I looked up, meeting his gaze. Actually, Darius, I said, my voice clear and carrying through the silent tent. Before I sign this, I have a little surprise for you, too. A gift. I think you are going to love it. I lowered the pen and signaled to the AV technician I had bribed earlier. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Behind us, the large projection screen flickered to life. The crowd murmured, expecting a slideshow of wedding photos or perhaps architectural renderings of our imaginary new estate. Instead, the image was grainy but unmistakable. It was our kitchen viewed from a high angle. The date stamp in the corner read 3 weeks ago. Darius stood at the counter, his back to the camera but his actions clear. He was holding a small amber bottle. He tipped it over a steaming mug of coffee, shaking a fine white powder into the dark liquid. He stirred it quickly, then shoved the bottle into his pocket. He turned, revealing his face. He was smiling. It was the same smile he was wearing right now on stage. A gasp rippled through the audience. I saw Lucille's hand fly to her mouth. Viktor Volkov's expression shifted from boredom to intense interest. Darius froze. He stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "That is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is fake." She doctored it. But the video continued. It showed Chantel entering the room. It showed the swap. It showed Darius's face contort in terror as his sister drank the poison meant for his wife. The silence in the tent was absolute, broken only by the soft jazz still playing in the background, a surreal soundtrack to a public execution. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady. That powder was digoxin, high potency, stolen from a pharmacy. It was meant to kill me. Instead, it paralyzed his sister. Darius lunged. He dropped the facade of the loving husband and became the desperate animal he truly was. He rushed across the stage, his hands reaching for the microphone, reaching for me. "Shut up!" he screamed. "Shut up, you lying B-word!" But he never reached me. A figure tackled him from the side, hitting him with the force of a freight train. It was Brad. The man who had been a doormat for years, who had let his wife and brother-in-law walk all over him, had finally snapped. He drove Darius into the stage floor, his fists flying. "You poisoned her!" Brad roared, each punch punctuating his words. "You poisoned my wife! You monster!" The crowd erupted into chaos. Waiters dropped trays. People screamed. Lucille was wailing, clutching her chest. But I stood calm in the center of the storm, watching. This was not just revenge. This was justice. And I was just getting started. I tapped my phone again. The video on the screen changed. Now it was audio accompanied by a transcript scrolling across the screen. It was the recording of Lucille and Darius in the kitchen. "Next time, do it right," Lucille's voice boomed through the speakers, amplified for everyone to hear. "Make it look like an accident. No more poison." Darius struggled under Brad, trying to throw him off, but the crowd was closing in. Their faces were not friendly anymore. They were horrified. They were angry. They were witnesses. Security finally pulled Brad off Darius, but the damage was done. Darius lay panting on the stage, his lips split, his tuxedo torn. He looked up at me with wild, desperate eyes, begging me to stop. But I was not done. I tapped the screen again. The audio file I had recorded from the pantry filled the tent, booming over the high-quality sound system Darius had paid for with stolen money. "You tried to kill your wife and you almost killed me." Lucille's voice was unmistakable, shrill and furious. "You are reckless, Darius. If the police find tool marks on the brake lines, we are ruined." The color drained from Lucille's face. She slumped in her wheelchair beside Chantel, looking like a ghost. The guests, who had been whispering in shock, fell into a stunned silence. They were not just hearing a family dispute. They were hearing a confession to conspiracy to commit murder. My mother-in-law, the woman who prided herself on her standing in the church and the community, had just been exposed as an accomplice to her son's failed hit job. But I had one final nail for the coffin. I swiped left on my phone, bringing up the financial records. The screen behind me changed to a spreadsheet. It was a forensic accounting of the Horizon Fund, Darius's investment firm. "I know many of you here tonight entrusted Darius with your savings," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the tent. "You thought he was investing in blue-chip stocks and emerging markets. You thought you were seeing returns." I highlighted a column of red numbers. "This is where your money actually went." The screen showed wire transfers. Not to companies, but to offshore gambling sites, crypto wallets known for money laundering, and high-interest payments to shadow lenders. $2 million in client funds evaporated in 6 months, I stated. He did not just steal from me, he stole from all of you. A roar of outrage went up from the crowd. Several partners from his firm looked ready to storm the stage. But one man did not shout. Viktor Volkov sat in the front row, his glass of vodka untouched on the table. He was staring at the screen at the undeniable proof that the money he had loaned Darius was gone, burned. There would be no insurance payout. There was no inheritance. There was nothing. Volkov stood up slowly. His movement was fluid, lethal. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Darius, who was scrambling backward on the stage, trying to hide behind a speaker. Volkov did not say a word. He just buttoned his jacket and looked at Darius with dead, shark eyes. He realized in that moment that Darius was not just a bad investment. He was a dead end. And Viktor Volkov did not like dead ends. The wail of sirens cut through the tense silence of the tent, slicing the humid night air. Blue and red lights flashed against the white canvas, creating a disorienting strobe effect. The guests who had been frozen in shock moments before began to scatter, moving away from the stage as if Darius were radioactive. Uniformed officers swarmed the backyard, their movements precise and coordinated. Agent Sterling led the charge, flanked by 2 officers. He moved straight for the stage, his badge glinting under the lights. Darius Peterson. Sterling announced, his voice booming over the sound system. You are under arrest for attempted murder, money laundering, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Darius scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. No, he screamed, backing away until he hit the edge of the stage. This is a mistake. She set me up. He pointed a shaking finger at me. That woman is a liar. She is a snake. She fabricated everything. She doctored the videos. She wants my money. I stood my ground, watching him unravel. It is over, Darius, I said, my voice calm amidst the chaos. The game is over. An officer grabbed Darius' arm, twisting it behind his back. He howled in pain and indignation. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I am a partner at Horizon Fund. I will sue you. I will sue all of you. The cuffs clicked shut with a sound of finality that echoed in the tent. Sterling looked at me and nodded a silent acknowledgement of the takedown. But Darius wasn't done. As they dragged him off the stage, kicking and screaming, he locked eyes with the one person he thought would always save him. Mom! He wailed, his voice cracking into a desperate sob. Mom, help me! Tell them it is a lie! Do something! Lucille sat in her wheelchair, her face a mask of horror. She looked at her golden child now, a broken man in handcuffs. She looked at the police swarming her property. She looked at the guests staring at her with judgment. And then she looked at me. For a moment I saw the old Lucille, the woman who would burn the world down to protect her son. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend him, to lie for him one last time. But then she saw Agent Sterling walking toward her with a pair of handcuffs in his hand. Lucille Peterson. Sterling said, his voice devoid of sympathy. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Lucille's eyes went wide. Me, she whispered. You cannot arrest me. I am a respected member of this community. I am a mother. You are an accomplice, Sterling corrected. Stand up, Mrs. Peterson. Darius, seeing his mother being approached, let out a guttural scream. Mom, save me. Do not let them take me. Lucille looked at her son, her eyes filled with panic. She looked at the handcuffs. And then, in a moment of pure selfish preservation, she made her choice. Officer. Wait. Lucille stammered, her hand diving into her expensive clutch. You do not understand. This is all a misunderstanding. My son is a good boy. He is under a lot of stress. Surely we can resolve this without a scene. She pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, the emergency cash she always carried for shopping sprees. She thrust it toward Agent Sterling, her eyes wide and manic. Here, take this. There is $5,000 here. Just take the cuffs off him. Let us talk about this like civilized people. Agent Sterling stared at the money, his expression hardening from professional detachment to disgust. Ma and put the money away, he ordered, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. Lucille did not listen. She was not used to being told no. She was used to buying her way out of trouble. She took a step closer, trying to press the cash into Sterling's hand. "It is not enough," she asked, her voice rising in hysteria. "I have more in the house. I can write a check. Name your price. Just make this go away." That was the final straw. Sterling grabbed her wrist, the cash fluttering to the ground like dead leaves. "Lucille Peterson, you are under arrest for attempted bribery of a federal officer in addition to the charges of conspiracy and obstruction. Turn around." The crowd gasped. This was the matriarch of their community, the woman who sat in the front pew at church, the woman who judged everyone else's moral failings. Now she was being manhandled by the police, her dignity stripped away along with her freedom. The cold metal cuffs clicked around her wrists, pinning her arms behind her back. She let out a small, pathetic squeak of pain. "But I am a mother," she wailed, the reality finally crashing down on her. "I was just protecting my son. You cannot arrest a mother for loving her child." "You are not being arrested for loving him," Sterling said, pushing her gently but firmly toward the waiting patrol cars. "You are being arrested for helping him plan a murder." Lucille panicked. She thrashed against the officer's grip, her eyes scanning the crowd, wildly looking for a savior. Her gaze landed on me. I was standing near the edge of the tent, watching the woman who had made my life a misery for years finally face the consequences of her arrogance. "Brianna," she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "Brianna, tell them. Tell them to stop. We are family. You cannot let them take me. I am your mother-in-law. I welcomed you into this home. Please, Brianna, help me." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had slapped me in the hospital. The woman who had told her son to do it right next time. The woman who had valued her reputation over my life. The air in the tent was thick with tension, everyone waiting to see if the dutiful daughter-in-law would crack. I met her gaze, my expression completely blank. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply looked at her, like she was a stranger I had passed on the street. I slowly turned my back on her, presenting her with the cold line of my shoulders. I walked away toward the house, leaving her screams echoing in the night. The bond was broken, the debt was paid, and I had absolutely nothing left to say to Lucille Peterson. With Lucille dragged away in the back of a squad car, the focus of the crowd shifted to the last remaining member of the Peterson dynasty. Chantel sat alone in her wheelchair at the edge of the stage. The vibrant woman who had terrorized me for years was gone, replaced by a shrieking banshee. Her face was contorted with a rage so pure it looked painful. She gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white as she screamed at me. "You ruined everything," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. "You jealous, spiteful witch! You did this, you planted that evidence. You turned them against me. I hope you rot." She tried to wheel herself toward me, her movements jerky and uncoordinated due to the paralysis, but the brakes were locked. She was trapped in her own fury, flailing uselessly, while the guests watched in morbid fascination. I stood my ground, silently observing her meltdown. It was the tantrum of a spoiled child who had finally been told no, but this time there was no mother to soothe her, no brother to pay off the consequences. She was alone, or so she thought. From the shadows of the tent, Brad emerged. He walked slowly, his gait heavy but steady. He stopped in front of his wife, looking down at her with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not fear. It was not adoration. It was pity mixed with revulsion. Chantel looked up at him, her eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. "Brad," she gasped, reaching out a hand. "Brad, get me out of here. Take me home. These people are crazy. We need to call a lawyer." Brad did not take her hand. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick white envelope. He dropped it into her lap. It landed with a soft slap that sounded louder than her screaming. Chantel looked at it confused. "What is this?" she asked. "It is over." "Chantel," Brad said, his voice flat and final. "I filed the papers this morning. That is a petition for divorce and a restraining order. I am taking the kids to my sister's house tonight. You are not to come near them." Chantel stared at him, her mouth hanging open. "Divorce," she whispered. "You cannot divorce me. You are nothing without me. I made you." "You used me," Brad corrected. "You used me to steal drugs. You used me to cover for your brother. You treated me like a servant in my own home. I have endured enough. I stayed for the kids hoping you would change, but I see now that you are incapable of change. You and Darius are not just selfish. You are monsters. You would burn down the world just to warm your hands." He took a step back, putting distance between them. "And do not think you can charm your way out of this with the police. I have already spoken to Agent Sterling. I gave him the inventory logs. I gave him the text messages you sent me demanding I steal more pills. I am going to be a witness, Chantel. I am going to testify against you and your brother. I am going to make sure you both pay for every single thing you did." The blood drained from Chantella's face, leaving her as pale as the tablecloths. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with the weight of a collapsing building. Her husband was gone. Her children were gone. Her freedom was gone. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that went beyond anger. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream, to beg, but no sound came out. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and her body went limp. She slumped forward in the wheelchair, sliding awkwardly to the side like a broken doll. This was not one of her dramatic performances. Her body, weakened by poison and overwhelmed by shock, had simply given up. Chantel Peterson had fainted dead away, leaving only the silence of her ruin behind. I stood on the other side of the one-way glass, watching Darius pace the small interrogation room like a caged tiger. He was still wearing his torn tuxedo, though it was now rumpled and stained with sweat. He had demanded his lawyer the moment they brought him in, and was now waiting with an air of arrogant impatience. He genuinely believed he was going to walk out of here. He thought his money, his connections, and his sheer audacity would save him one last time. He did not realize that I had already burned every bridge he had. Agent Sterling opened the door and gestured for me to enter. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "You do not have to talk to him." I nodded. "I need him to know. I need him to understand exactly why he lost." I walked into the room, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Darius stopped pacing and turned to face me. A sneer curled his lip. "Well, if it is not the grieving widow," he spat. "You think you are clever, do you not, Brianna? You think this little stunt is going to stick? My lawyer will have me out of here in an hour. And then I am going to sue you for everything you have. I'm going to bury you in litigation until you are living in a cardboard box." I sat down at the metal table, folding my hands in front of me. I looked at him calmly, my expression devoid of fear or anger. "There is no lawyer coming, Darius," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I called your firm's legal department. They are not representing you. In fact, they are currently cooperating with the SEC investigation into your embezzlement. They fired you 20 minutes ago." Darius's sneer faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I will hire my own lawyer. I have money." "Do you?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because according to my forensic analysis, you have negative $3 million. And Viktor Volkov is not exactly in a lending mood right now. He is in the next room, by the way, cutting a deal with the FBI. He is giving them everything, Darius. Every transaction, every meeting, every threat. He is pinning the money laundering on you to save himself." Darius paled, his hands trembling slightly. "That is a lie. Volkov would never talk. He is a professional." "Professionals survive," I countered. "Amateurs like you get caught. But that is not even the worst part." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of a loan agreement with a shadow banking firm, one of the many Darius had used to cover his gambling losses. I slid it across the table. Look at the guarantor, Darius. Look at whose name is on the collateral. He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the text. He froze. His face went gray, his mouth opening in a silent scream of denial. No, he whispered. No, I did not do that. You forged your mother a signature, I said, my voice cold. You used Lucille S. House, her retirement fund, her life savings as collateral for your loans. And since you defaulted last week, the creditors have already started the seizure process. By tomorrow morning, your mother will be homeless. She will have nothing. No house, no money, no reputation. You did not just ruin yourself, Darius. You destroyed her. You took everything she ever loved, and you burned it to the ground. Darius dropped the paper as if it were on fire. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that went beyond self-preservation. He realized finally that there was no way out. No lawyer could fix this. No money could buy him freedom. He had sacrificed his mother to save himself, and in the end, he had lost them both. He sank into the chair, his arrogance shattering into a million pieces, leaving only a terrified, pathetic man who had played a game he never understood and lost everything. I walked down the hallway to the adjacent observation room where Lucille was being held. Agent Sterling had just stepped inside her interrogation room, armed with the document I had provided. I needed to see this. I needed to witness the exact moment the bond between mother and son dissolved under the acid of their own selfishness. Lucille sat at the table, her posture rigid, her face a mask of indignation. She was still trying to play the grand dame, demanding to speak to the mayor, threatening to have Sterling's badge. Agent Sterling sat down opposite her and placed the loan agreement on the table. He did not shout. He simply slid the paper forward and explained the situation with brutal clarity. He told her that Darius had forged her signature. He told her that her sprawling estate, the symbol of her status, was now the property of a violent loan shark organization. He told her that her bank accounts had been drained to pay the interest. She was not just facing prison. She was facing absolute destitution. I watched the blood drain from Lucille's face. For a woman like her, poverty was a fate far worse than death. She stared at the paper, her hands trembling, uncontrollable. She whispered her son's name, but it was not with affection. It was with a dawning realization of betrayal. He sacrificed me, she murmured. He threw me to the wolves to save himself. Then the dam broke. The calculated composure vanished, replaced by the desperate scrambling of a rat on a sinking ship. She looked up at Sterling, her eyes wide and pleading. I want to make a deal, she said, her voice shrill. I can give him to you. I can tell you everything. It was all his idea. The insurance fraud, the poison. He came to me weeks ago talking about how Brianna was worth more dead. I told him not to do it. I begged him to find another way, but he would not listen. I listened in stunned silence as she wove a tapestry of lies and half-truths, painting herself as the helpless victim of a sociopathic son. She confessed to knowing about the digoxin, but claimed she thought it was for a dog. She admitted to the conversation about the car accident, but insisted she was just trying to calm him down. It was a masterclass in self-preservation. She was selling her golden boy down the river without a second thought, hoping that if she gave the police a big enough fish, they might let the minnow go. She signed the statement with a shaking hand, effectively sealing Darius's fate. Agent Sterling returned to Darius's room, a grim satisfaction on his face. He held up the signed confession. Your mother is very cooperative, Darius, he said, his voice flat. She told us about the insurance scheme. She told us about the poison. She even told us about the time you asked her to help you stage a burglary to cover your tracks last year. She says she was afraid of you. She says you forced her to stay silent. Darius stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. He read his mother's words, the accusations, the lies, the abandonment. The arrogance that had sustained him for so long finally evaporated. He let out a low, animalistic moan. No, he sobbed, his voice broken and small. Not Mom. She would not do this, she promised. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting the metal table with a dull thud. His shoulders began to shake violently. The man who had plotted my murder, who had sneered at my pain, who had treated the world like his personal playground, was gone. In his place was a terrified little boy crying for a mother who had just sold him out for a chance at a plea deal. He wailed, a sound of pure despair echoing off the cold concrete walls, realizing that he was truly and utterly alone. The weeks following the arrests were a blur of depositions and legal briefs, but for the first time in years I felt completely in control. As the primary victim and still the legal wife of the accused, I held a unique position of power. The authorities needed my forensic accounting skills to untangle the chaotic web of shell companies and hidden accounts Darius had created. It was tedious work tracking down every dollar he had tried to hide, but it paid off. The bank fraud investigation concluded swiftly. Since the transfer of our life savings had been a direct act of theft and forgery without my consent, the bank's insurance policy kicked in. The $500,000 Darius had tried to send to the Cayman Islands was returned to my account in full. It was clean money now. It was untainted by his gambling or his crimes. I stared at the balance on my phone screen, feeling a grim satisfaction. He had tried to leave me with nothing, and instead he had handed me the war chest I needed for my final move. The fallout from the forged loan documents was catastrophic for Lucille. The shadow lenders did not care about family drama or court cases. They wanted their money. When the police seized the assets as part of the criminal investigation, the lenders triggered the foreclosure clause on the property Darius had put up as collateral. Lucille's estate, the sprawling mansion where she had looked down on me for 3 years, was going on the auction block. The bank holding the primary mortgage wanted a quick sale. They wanted to distance themselves from the scandal and avoid a protracted legal battle with the criminal elements attached to the secondary loans. They priced the house to move quickly. I sat in the office of the bank manager, a man who looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. I told him I wanted to make a cash offer. He looked at the number on the check and then at me. It was a fraction of what the house was actually worth, a price that would have made Lucille faint if she were not already in a cell. But it was enough to cover the principal debt and close the toxic file for the bank. The manager hesitated for only a second before sliding the paperwork across the desk. He accepted. I signed the papers with a steady hand. I was not just buying a piece of real estate, I was buying the symbol of their dynasty. The very walls that had held their secrets, their judgment, and their cruelty now belonged to me. I drove over to the property later that afternoon. The foreclosure sign was gone. I parked in the circular driveway where Lucille used to critique my car. I walked up the stone steps where Darius had tried to kill me with cooking oil. I took the heavy brass key out of my pocket. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I unlocked the massive front door and stepped into the foyer. It still smelled of lemon polish and expensive potpourri, the scent of a life Lucille had fought so hard to maintain. Now she was sitting in a detention center, wearing a scratchy orange jumpsuit, and I was standing in her foyer holding the deed. The silence in the house was absolute. It was no longer a fortress of the Peterson family. It was just a house, and I was the landlord. I walked through the empty rooms planning what I would do with my new asset. I would not live here, of course. I would not sleep under this roof. But owning it, owning the physical manifestation of their pride, felt like the ultimate victory. I had taken back my life, my money, and now I had taken their sanctuary. The front door creaked open, breaking the heavy silence of the afternoon. I sat in the high-backed velvet armchair that had been Lucille's throne for 30 years, waiting. I heard the shuffling of feet and the heavy breathing of a woman who had lost everything. Lucille stepped into the foyer. She looked nothing like the imperious matriarch who had ruled this house with an iron fist. Her designer suit was wrinkled and stained from 2 nights in a holding cell. Her hair, usually coiffed to perfection, was a matted mess, and her face was gray with exhaustion and fear. She looked up and saw me sitting in her chair. For a moment, confusion clouded her eyes, but then a look of desperate relief washed over her features. She let out a sob and rushed toward me, her arms outstretched. "Brianna, oh, thank God," she cried, her voice cracking. "I knew you would come through. I knew you would not let them keep me in that place. Did you pay the bail? Did you talk to the lawyers?" She collapsed onto the sofa opposite me, wiping tears from her eyes with dirty fingers. "I told them it was a mistake. I told them you would clear everything up. Look at this mess." She gestured vaguely at her disheveled appearance, regaining a shred of her old arrogance. "Go to the kitchen and make me some tea, Brianna, Earl Grey, and run a bath. I need to wash the stench of that place off me. Then we can discuss how we are going to fix this." I did not move. I did not speak. I just watched her clutching the shreds of her dignity, trying to order me around one last time. The delusion was almost impressive. She genuinely believed that after everything she had done, I was still her servant. I was still the quiet little mouse she could bully into submission. "Lucille," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife, "I am not making you tea, and I am not running you a bath." She blinked, surprised by my tone. "Do not be difficult, Brianna. I have had a terrible few days. We need to focus on saving the house. The bank is threatening to seize it because of Darius's stupidity. You need to use that insurance money to pay off the arrears. It is the least you can do after I welcomed you into this family." I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "You do not have to worry about the bank, Lucille. The arrears have been paid. The foreclosure has been stopped." Lucille's face lit up, a smile stretching across her haggard features. "Oh, you wonderful girl. I knew it. I knew you were loyal. You saved the house." I walked over to the fireplace where the deed to the property was resting on the mantel. I picked it up and held it out to her. "No, Lucille. I did not save the house for you. I bought it." She froze. "What do you mean you bought it?" "I mean I paid the bank the outstanding debt plus the principal. I am the owner, Lucille. This house, the furniture, the paintings on the walls, it all belongs to me. You are currently trespassing on my property." The color drained from her face completely. She looked from me to the deed, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. "But you cannot. This is my home. I raised my children here. You cannot just take it." "You lost it," I corrected her. "You lost it when you let your son forge your signature. You lost it when you tried to bribe a federal officer. And you definitely lost it when you plotted to kill me." I walked to the front door and opened it wide, letting the hot, humid air flood the cool foyer. I held up the heavy brass key to the front gate. "You have 1 hour, Lucille. Take whatever you can fit into a suitcase. Clothes, toiletries, personal items. Everything else stays. If you are not off the property in 60 minutes, I am calling the police and having you removed for trespassing. And considering you are out on bail, I do not think you want another interaction with the law." She scrambled to her feet, tears streaming down her face again. "Brianna, please, where will I go? I have nowhere. Why are you doing this? Why do you need this house? You hate this place." I looked at her with cold, hard eyes. "You are right. I do hate this place. It reeks of greed and betrayal. I have no intention of living here." "Then why?" she screamed. "Why buy it?" I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. "I am selling it, Lucille. I have already been in touch with a local nonprofit. They are looking for a facility to house women and children escaping domestic abuse. I am donating the property to them. This house, which was a prison for me, will become a sanctuary for women who have suffered at the hands of people like you and your son." I tossed the key out the door. It landed in the dirt of the driveway with a dull thud. "Start packing, Lucille. The clock is ticking." The silence in the apartment was deafening. It was not the peaceful silence of solitude, but the hollow, echoing silence of abandonment. Brad was gone. He had not just walked out, he had evacuated. The closets were stripped bare, leaving only wire hangers jangling on the rods. The children's rooms were empty, their beds stripped, their toys gone. He had taken them to his sister's house, leaving me alone in a home that was rapidly becoming a tomb. I sat in my wheelchair in the center of the living room where he had left me. My left side was a dead weight, a heavy, useless anchor dragging me down. My throat was parched. I had been sitting here for hours, unable to navigate the narrow hallway to the kitchen because the rug had bunched up under my wheels, trapping me. I was thirsty. I was hungry. And for the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly helpless. I checked my bank account on my phone again, praying for a miracle. Zero. Actually, less than zero. The accounts were frozen pending the investigation into Darius's fraud. My credit cards were maxed out, declined. Brad had canceled the joint cards before he walked out the door. I was destitute. The princess of the Peterson family, the woman who had demanded the best of everything, was now trapped in a prison of her own making, without even a bottle of water to her name. I scrolled through my contacts, my finger hovering over the names. Mom was gone, evicted, and likely looking for a shelter. Darius was in a cell. My friends, the ones who drank my champagne and laughed at my jokes, had all stopped answering my calls the moment the news broke. There was only one person left. One person who had resources. One person who was family by law, if not by blood. I swallowed my pride, which tasted like bile, and dialed the number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. "Hello, Chantel." Her voice was calm, cool, unbothered. It made my blood boil, but I forced a sob into my voice, playing the victim one last time. "Brianna, please, you have to help me. I am all alone. Brad left me. He took the kids. He took the money. I am stuck in the living room, Brianna. I cannot move. I am thirsty. I haven't eaten all day. You cannot just leave me here to die. We are family." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the faint sound of typing in the background, as if she were working, as if my desperation was nothing more than a minor interruption. "Brad did the right thing," Chantel, Brianna said finally. "He is protecting his children from a toxic environment. He called social services. They will be coming by later to assess your situation. You will be placed in a state facility, a nursing home for the poor." The thought made me gag. "No, Brianna, please, I cannot go there. Just come over. Bring me some food. Bring me some money. I am sorry, okay? I am sorry about what happened. Just help me. I am so thirsty. My throat is burning." I heard a soft laugh on the other end. It was a chilling sound devoid of any humor. "You are thirsty, Chantel?" she asked. "Yes," I cried, relief washing over me. "Yes, I am dying of thirst." "Well," Brianna said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a judge delivering a death sentence. "You always did love my coffee, didn't you? You were so eager to drink it that day in the kitchen. You wanted what was mine so badly you poisoned yourself to get it." I froze, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "I think there is a coffee maker in the kitchen, Chantel," she continued. "If you want a drink, you can go make it yourself." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen turning black, reflecting my own terrified face. I screamed a raw, guttural sound of pure rage and despair, but there was no one there to hear it. I was alone in the dark with nothing but the memory of the poison I had swallowed and the woman who had finally served it back to me. 6 months of depositions, hearings, and legal maneuvering culminated in a single rainy Tuesday morning. The courtroom was packed, a testament to how far the scandal had spread. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecutor, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I was no longer the victim. I was the witness to their end. Darius stood before the judge. The prison system had not been kind to him. He had lost weight, his once athletic frame now gaunt and hunched. His expensive haircut had grown out into a shaggy, unkempt mess, and his suit, provided by a public defender, hung loosely on his shoulders. He did not look at me. He stared at the floor, trembling slightly, as the judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, money laundering, wire fraud. The list went on a litany of his failures. The judge did not mince words. He called Darius a predator, a man who had abused the trust of his family and his clients for personal gain. When the sentence was handed down, a collective gasp rippled through the room. 25 years in a federal penitentiary, without the possibility of parole for at least 20. Darius closed his eyes and swayed on his feet as if he had been punched in the gut. His life as he knew it was over. He would be an old man before he ever saw the outside world again. Then it was Lucille's turn. She stood up, clutching a tissue to her nose, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. She expected leniency. She expected her age and her status as a mother to save her. And in a way they did. The judge suspended her prison sentence, citing her cooperation in the final weeks and her lack of prior convictions. But he gave her something far worse than a cell. He ordered full restitution. Lucille was stripped of everything. Her remaining accounts were seized. Her jewelry, her cars, her furs, everything was auctioned off to pay back the victims of the fraud. She was left destitute. The court had arranged for her placement in a government-subsidized housing project on the south side of the city. It was a place with peeling paint-thin walls and sirens that wailed through the night. For a woman who had measured her worth by her zip code and her china pattern, this was a fate worse than death. She would spend the rest of her days surrounded by the poverty she had always despised, living on food stamps and the charity of strangers. As the proceedings ended, the bailiffs moved in to take Darius away. The heavy metallic click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the gallery until they landed on me. I did not look away. I did not smile. I simply held his gaze, my expression impassive. For years I had seen arrogance in those eyes. I had seen contempt, entitlement, and a smug superiority that made my skin crawl. But as he looked at me now across the divide of the courtroom, that arrogance was gone. It had been scrubbed away by the harsh reality of his defeat. In its place was something raw and primal. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me and he did not see the wife he could manipulate or the woman he could kill. He saw the architect of his destruction. He saw the person who had outsmarted him at his own game. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. He just stared at me, terrified of the power I held, realizing too late that he had underestimated me. The doors closed behind him, severing him from the world, and I stood up, ready to walk out into the rain and start my life. The smell of pine sol and boiled cabbage hung heavy in the air of the Shady Oaks State Care Facility. It was a smell that stuck to your skin and coated your tongue, a constant reminder of where you were. For Chantel Peterson, this smell was the ultimate insult. She sat in her wheelchair by the window, staring out at a cracked parking lot and a dumpster that was currently being raided by a stray cat. This was her view now. No more manicured lawns, no more infinity pools, no more ocean vistas, just asphalt and trash. Her room was a cramped box she shared with a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who snored like a chainsaw and smelled faintly of mothballs. The walls were a peeling beige, the linoleum floor scuffed and stained. Chantel looked down at her hands. The manicures were a distant memory. Her nails were jagged and bitten her skin rough. She wore a faded blue hospital gown that tied in the back, a garment that stripped away every shred of her dignity. She adjusted the blanket over her paralyzed legs, her left hand trembling slightly. It was the only part of her that still had some strength, but even that was fading under the weight of her despair. A nurse bustled in, a large woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda. She carried a plastic tray with a bowl of gray mush that was supposed to be oatmeal. "Time to eat, Chantel." Brenda said, her voice loud and patronizing, like she was speaking to a toddler. "Open up, sweetie. I do not want that slop." Chantel snapped, or she tried to snap. Her voice was still slurred, a lingering effect of the neurotoxin. It came out as a garbled mumble. "I want eggs. Benedict. And coffee. Good coffee." Brenda sighed, setting the tray down on the rolling table. We do not have eggs, Benedict Chantel. We have oatmeal. Eat it or starve. It makes no difference to me. Chantel glared at her, glared at. Do you know who I am? She hissed, struggling to enunciate. I am a Peterson. My brother is Darius Peterson. He is a financial genius. He owns half of Atlanta. When he gets out of When he comes back, he is going to sue this entire place. He is going to fire you. I will have you on the street. Brenda laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Yeah, I know. You tell me that every day. Your brother, the billionaire. Listen, honey, if your brother was so rich, you wouldn't be in a state-funded bed wearing a gown that has been washed 500 times. You are here because nobody else wants you. Now eat your oatmeal. She walked out, leaving Chantel fuming. Nobody believed her. To the staff and the other residents, she was just the crazy lady in room 304, the one with the delusions of grandeur, the one who told wild stories about galas and private jets while drooling on herself. They called her the Duchess behind her back, a cruel nickname that stung more than any slap. Later that afternoon, the orderlies wheeled the residents into the common room for recreation time. This mostly consisted of staring at a large television mounted high on the wall, encased in a protective plexiglass box so no one could throw a shoe at it. The room was filled with the sounds of coughing and the low murmur of the game show on the screen. Chantel sat in the back, isolated in her misery. She hated these people. She hated being lumped in with them. She belonged in a penthouse, not an asylum for the discarded. The game show ended and the local news came on. The anchor, a woman with perfect hair and a bright yellow blazer, began to read the evening headlines. Chantel watched with half-hearted interest, hoping for a story about a fire or a scandal, something to distract her from the ache in her legs. And then she saw it. The headline flashed across the bottom of the screen, "Local Hero Honors." The image shifted to a podium set up in front of the city hall. There was a crowd of reporters, cameras flashing, and standing at the microphone looking radiant in a tailored white suit was Brianna. Chantel gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned forward, straining against the straps of her chair. It was her. It was really her. But she looked different. She looked powerful. Her hair was styled in a sleek bob. Her makeup was flawless. And she projected an aura of confidence that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. The news anchor's voice floated over the speakers. Tonight, the city honors Brianna Peterson, a local forensic accountant whose tireless work helped dismantle a massive money laundering ring and expose a network of predatory lenders. Her bravery in the face of personal danger has saved countless victims from financial ruin. Chantel's mouth fell open. Hero. They were calling her a hero. The woman who had ruined her life. The woman who had turned her brother in. The woman who had watched Chantel drink poison and done nothing. Brianna smiled at the camera on the screen, holding up a crystal plaque. I only did what anyone would do, she said, her voice clear and melodic. We must stand up to corruption wherever we find it, even if it is in our own homes. I am donating the proceeds from the sale of the confiscated properties to the Victims Fund. We are rebuilding lives starting today. Chantel began to scream. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure rage. She pointed a shaking finger at the screen. That is a lie, she shrieked, her words slurring together. She is the devil. She did this to me. She stole my money. She stole my house. Look at her. She is laughing at me. The other residents turned to look at her, some with annoyance, others with vague curiosity. An orderly rushed over. Hey, calm down, Chantel, he said, gripping her wheelchair handles. It is just the news. No. Chantel yelled, tears streaming down her face. You do not understand. That is my sister-in-law. She put me here. She is evil. Tell them. You have to tell them. The orderly shook his head, exchanging a look with a nurse nearby. There she goes again, he muttered. Talking about her rich relatives. Come on, Duchess, time for your meds. You are getting worked up over nothing. He spun her wheelchair around, turning her away from the screen. Chantel craned her neck, trying to get one last look. On the TV, Brianna was shaking hands with the mayor, the flashbulbs popping like fireworks. She looked like a queen ascending her throne. No, Chantel sobbed as she was wheeled down the hallway back toward the smell of bleach and cabbage. It is not fair. It is mine. That life was mine. But nobody was listening. Her screams faded into the background noise of the facility, just another rant from the crazy lady in room 304. Brianna was the hero, the philanthropist, the survivor. And Chantel was just a ghost in a wheelchair, erased from the narrative, forgotten by the world, and left to rot in the shadow of the woman she had tried to destroy. The air up here in Montana is different. It is thinner and cleaner, and it carries the scent of pine instead of the suffocating humidity of Atlanta. I wake up at 6 every morning, not because my alarm is blaring or because Lucille is screaming at me to fix a leak, but because the sun is hitting the snow-capped peaks outside my bedroom window. It is a quiet life, a simple life, and after 10 years of living in a war zone, it feels like paradise. I moved here 3 days after the trial. I packed what little I had into my old truck, strapped the kids into the back seat, and just drove north until the map turned green. We live in a small rental house on the edge of town. It has a creaky porch and a leaky faucet, but it is ours. The kids are happy. They play in the dirt in the backyard and they go to a school where nobody cares about their last name or how much their shoes cost. They are forgetting the yelling. They are forgetting the tension that used to make them hide under their beds. They are learning to be children again. I used the last of my savings to put a down payment on a small independent pharmacy on Main Street. It is nothing like the high-pressure chain store where I used to work. There are no corporate metrics to meet. No inventory discrepancies to hide. I spend my days checking blood pressure for old ranchers and mixing cough syrup for toddlers. I know my customers by name. They bring me apple pies and homemade jam. For the first time in my career, I feel like a healer, not a drug dealer. I am not rich. I drive a truck with a dent in the bumper, and I wear flannel shirts instead of designer suits. But I sleep at night. I close my eyes and I do not see Darius's face or hear Chantel's shrill voice demanding more. I am free. Last night after I put the kids to bed, I sat down at my kitchen table with a pen and a notepad. It took me 3 hours to write 2 pages. I addressed the letter to Brianna. I did not know if she would ever read it. She is a big shot now, a hero on the news running foundations and giving speeches. But I owed her. I owed her my life. I wrote about the kids. I told her that little Sophie asks about her Aunt Brianna sometimes, and I tell her that her aunt is a brave knight who fought a dragon and won. It sounds silly, but it is the truth. I wrote to thank her. You saved us, Brianna. You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me the courage to stand up when my knees were shaking. You told me I had a choice when I thought I was trapped in that house forever. I will never be able to repay that debt. You gave my children a future where they do not have to be afraid. But there was one thing I included in the letter that I had never told anyone else. Not the police. Not Agent Sterling. It was a secret I found while I was packing up the attic in the Peterson house. I found an old locked file box hidden behind the insulation in the far corner. It was Lucille S. private archive. I picked the lock expecting to find tax returns or old love letters. Instead, I found adoption papers. Darius was not her biological son. Lucille adopted him when he was 3 months old. But that is not the shocking part. The file contained the medical and legal records of his biological parents. His father was a man named Elias Thorne. He died in a state penitentiary on death row. He was a serial arsonist and a diagnosed psychopath who had killed 4 people. The medical notes in the file were chilling. The doctors had warned Lucille. They told her there was a high genetic probability of antisocial personality disorder. They told her that the boy might carry the same darkness as his father. But Lucille took him anyway. She was arrogant. She thought her money and her status could rewrite his DNA. She thought she could nurture the nature out of him. She spent his entire life covering for him not just because she loved him, but because she was terrified. She was watching for the monster to come out every single day. She knew what he was capable of. Every time he hurt a neighborhood pet or lied without blinking, she saw his father. She enabled him because she was trying to keep the beast in the cage. She created a monster because she was too proud to admit she had raised one. I burned the papers in the fireplace before I left. I did not want the kids to know their uncle was born broken, but I wanted Brianna to know. You were not just fighting a bad husband, Brianna. You were fighting a legacy of madness that went back generations. You survived something that was destined to destroy everything it touched. I sealed the envelope and walked it to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The wind was cold, but it felt good on my face. I watched the flag go up, a signal of the final end to the story. I turned back to my small house where the lights were warm and welcoming. My past was in that envelope, but my future was waiting inside. And for the first time in my life, I was happy to be just Brad the pharmacist. The liquidation of the Peterson estate was not just a business transaction, it was an exorcism. I sold it all. Every diamond earring Darius had given me to buy my silence, every designer handbag that Chantel had coveted, every piece of heavy antique furniture that Lucille had used to make me feel small. I turned their symbols of status into a check, and then I burned the bridge behind me. I did not keep a single memento. I did not want to look at a watch and remember the wrist that wore it, or sit on a chair and remember the lies told in it. I wanted a clean slate. With the proceeds from the house sale and the reward money from the bank insurance, I rented a sleek modern office space in downtown Atlanta. It has floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the light, not the shadows. On the glass door, in simple black lettering, it reads, Peterson Forensic Investigations. I kept the name. I earned it. But now, it means something different. It does not stand for greed or fraud. It stands for truth. My clients are women. They come to me with dark circles under their eyes and trembling hands clutching grocery bags full of crumpled receipts and bank statements. They tell me the same stories I lived. They tell me their husbands are successful, charming, and controlling. They tell me they are being told they are crazy for asking about the missing money. They tell me they are trapped. And I listen. I do not judge. I do not dismiss them. I tell them to sit down. I tell them to breathe. And then I go to hunt. I use every trick Darius taught me against men just like him. I track down the hidden crypto wallets. I unearth the shell companies buried in the Cayman Islands. I find the mistresses on the payroll and the gambling debts disguised as business expenses. I give these women the one thing they need to escape. I give them leverage. Seeing the look on a woman's face when I hand her a dossier that proves she is not crazy, that she is right, and that she is now rich enough to leave is the only payment I need. I am not just an accountant anymore. I am the woman who arms the victims. But everyone needs a break, even a crusader. That is why today my phone is off. I am 4,000 miles away from Atlanta, sitting at a small round table on a cobblestone street in the Marais district of Paris. The air is crisp and smells of rain and fresh bread. I am anonymous here. No one knows I am the woman from the news. No one knows I survived a murder plot. I am just a woman in a trench coat watching the world go by. The waiter approaches, his apron stark white against his black uniform. He places a porcelain cup in front of me. Steam rises from the dark liquid curling into the cool autumn air. It is a simple café crème. I wrap my hands around the warm ceramic and lift it to my face. I close my eyes and inhale deeply. I search for it out of habit. The sharp chemical tang, the cloying scent of bitter almonds, the smell of betrayal. But there is nothing. It smells only of roasted beans and rich cream. It smells of safety. It smells of peace. I open my eyes and take a long, slow sip. The warmth spreads through my chest, chasing away the last lingering chill of the past. It is the best cup of coffee I have ever had. I set it down on the saucer and smile at the empty chair across from me. I am alone. I am safe. And life finally tastes sweet. I put down my cup and catch my reflection in the window of the cafe. It is strange how much clarity distance provides. Back in Atlanta, amidst the chaos and the deception, I was constantly reacting, constantly moving just to stay alive. But here in the quiet of a Paris afternoon, I can finally see the entire picture. It is funny how they always called me the black sheep of the family. Lucille used to say it with a sneer, like I was a stain on her perfect white carpet. Darius used to say it with a laugh, like I was a joke he had to tolerate. They thought being the black sheep meant I was the outcast. They thought it meant I was the one who did not belong, the one who would be easy to cull from the herd when the winter came. They were so arrogant in their uniformity. They forgot the true nature of the black sheep. The white sheep blend in. They get lost in the crowd. They feel safe in their numbers, so they stop paying attention. They graze with their heads down, oblivious to the shadows creeping at the edge of the pasture. They follow blindly, trusting that the flock will protect them. But the black sheep stands out. The black sheep has nowhere to hide. Because I was different, I had to be vigilant. I had to sleep with one eye open. I had to learn to smell the predator on the wind long before the others even lifted their heads. They thought they were the shepherds guiding me to the slaughter. They thought they were the masters of the game, moving pieces around a board that only they could see. But they were just wolves. Sloppy, greedy, arrogant wolves. They were so busy looking at my wool, counting the money they could make from shearing me, that they never looked at my eyes. They never saw that I was watching them back. They never saw that I was memorizing their scent, their patterns, their weaknesses. They thought I was prey because I was quiet. They forgot that the hunter is quiet too before the strike. I am not a victim. I never was. I was a witness building a case. I was a judge writing a sentence. And in the end, I was the executioner who pulled the lever. They are gone now, swallowed by the very darkness they tried to use against me. Darius is rotting in a cell, Lucille is languishing in poverty, and Chantel is trapped in her own bitterness. They are finally experiencing the helplessness they tried to force on me. And I am still here, standing in the light, holding my cup, living a life that is entirely my own. So if you are out there listening to this, if you are the one they call the black sheep, if you are the one they underestimate or dismiss, do not be afraid. Wear your difference like armor. Use your isolation as a vantage point. Watch the shadows. Trust your gut even when everyone else tells you that you are crazy, because the wolf always comes in sheep's clothing, but the black sheep is the only one who can see the zipper. Stand your ground, protect your peace, and remember the most important rule of survival. The one lesson Darius Peterson learned too late to save himself. You can lie, you can cheat, you can steal, but do not ever under any circumstances mess with a woman as coffee. The story of the Peterson family serves as a powerful reminder that arrogance is often the architect of one's own destruction. Darius and Lucille believed that their wealth and social status made them untouchable. They viewed people not as human beings with dignity, but as assets to be exploited or liabilities to be removed. Their fatal mistake was underestimating the person they deemed the weakest. They confused Brianna's silence with submission and her kindness with naivety. This story teaches us that true power does not always roar. Sometimes it observes, waits, and strikes with precision. It highlights the importance of trusting our intuition. When the picture looks too perfect, or when the affection feels calculated, we must have the courage to investigate the cracks. We often dismiss red flags to keep the peace, but as Brianna showed us, peace purchased with ignorance is a debt that eventually destroys you. The black sheep is not the outcast. She is the survivor who learned to rely on herself when the herd was blind. Ultimately, justice is not something that is given. It is something that must be seized by those brave enough to stand alone. If you enjoyed watching the hunter become the hunted, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more satisfying stories of karma and justice served cold.